Thank you all for coming. We're being streamed live, which, considering my size over the ether, is probably not the most pleasant sight in the world, but hopefully somebody gets some value out of it. But it's a new experiment for us, and of course this is a new theatre as well, so it's a new environment for us all to perform in, let's say. But anyway, we've got a tip-top panel for you today to discuss workspaces. I'll start from my left, and we've got Farooq Khader, is it?
Yeah.
We've done an email, and none of us have actually done the names properly. Farooq Khader, technical lead at EMEA at Uber. To his left, we've got Jenny Hicks, who's group head of technology at Midwich Group. To Jenny's left, we've got Gary Keene, who is audiovisual manager at Google, which I thought was a very lowly title for the amount of work you do, Gary. I always gauge posh titles Clive. Equal pay rise in my book, but there you go. And at the end, we have Mr. Christopher. Is it Chris? Do you want me to do it Christopher or Chris? How would you like it?
Good.
Chris is good, okay.
Yeah.
He's a very humble man, you know, Christopher. Chris Jaynes, founder and CTO of Mersive Technologies, which is a mere fraction of what he actually does. He's a blogger and influential guy and a good thinker, so we're lucky to have him on the panel today, really. Well, the whole thing is looking at the future of AV in the workplace, and as we all know, there's a hell of a lot of guff that gets waffled on about, probably in magazines, hopefully not like myself, that just, where have we got to with all this? You know, where have we got to with workspace design? What have we learnt so far? Gary. Can we start off with you? I always like to go to Gary. Just the expression he gets on his face is a fear of horror when he gives the first one. But he composes himself and he's fantastic when he gets going. Gary.
Clive.
Darling.
So, is your question, what have we learned so far?
Yeah, what have we learned so far? I mean, we've come a long way. We must have been talking about workspace generally. You know, we've done our second yearly feature on the damn thing in a magazine. But, you know, I sometimes feel we're repeating theory, and not enough is actually said about where we've got to with workspace design. Well, what can we learn from it? What can we impart to an audience here in half an hour, though we've reached by the guys at the sharp end, if I may say so?
Okay, so I'm going to do this from an AV perspective, obviously, because otherwise we end up talking around subjects that may not be that relevant to the audience here. So if I look at where Google's at in terms of the role of AV within workspace design, we're viewed as integral. Yeah? So we are involved from day one of any conceptual project about a new space. So we don't have the problem of coming to the party late or being uncoordinated. We're seen as being integral to any new build project. Okay? So where that's got us to is we're now supporting 17,000 video conference rooms across the campus globally. So that's 160 plus offices in over 40 countries. We do that with a team of less than 100 in total. So for us, one of the ways in which we can run such a big estate with such a small team is by offering our customers a standardized experience. So having a very well thought out and well designed standardized product set, working very closely with construction teams, architects and designers, so that when they join the process of helping us create a new facility, they have assets which talk to them in their language, which tell them exactly what they need to be able to do to deliver this stuff on time. And then from an end user's point of view, we give our end users a consistent experience. So every room you go into, regardless of its location, you get exactly the same experience.
Because, I mean, you know, this is the problem I have with workspaces. Actually, people don't talk about the environment and the experience and the engagement. They talk about the technology. And for a while now, haven't we, we've almost got obsessed with what goes into a workspace, what accommodates it. It's put the liver fearing God up of most AV integrators and suppliers, because they suddenly see their major supply and big buy customers buying a lot less of their kit, and they're thinking, well, that's not a terribly good idea. We need to be flogging them more kit about these big workspaces, you know. So actually we're trying to turn it around and think of what should be the creative aspect, how you should be thinking properly analytically, but actually what your end game is, you know, which is people working in this thing, what actually is working. So it's not just technology, it's a much bigger picture, hence you're getting people in.
Yeah, so we when you look at what we do, we view ourselves, again, in terms of the workspace, as being an internal provider of two types of spaces. Yep. So ignore what goes on in the rooms themselves or the definition of the rooms, but when we look at how people need to work, typically you say, okay, for part of the day as an individual, I'm going to need to do some focused work where I don't need or want to be disturbed. For part of the day, I'm also going to take part in something that feels like a regular scheduled meeting, and I might be doing that from my desk, I might be doing that in a meeting room, and for another part of my day, I'm going to be doing more free-form collaboration. Yeah? So it's not scheduled, it's typically driven by an issue that's come up or an idea that someone's got, and the workspace needs to be able to respond to all three of those elements. Yeah, and do it in a dynamic way that allows you as an employee to have a productive, as productive a day as you possibly can. And as an AV vendor, internally, I need to provide the facilities that allow you to have the most productive day.
You've got both ends to consider, really, haven't you? Is it a sort of built-in flexibility? This flexibility in how to encapsulate it in a way that allows you to move forward with it. Do you have tools in workspace design? I mean, how do you? You think about things quite conceptually, don't you, Chris? I mean,
well, for us, because we're a vendor, we build things out of software, right? So a lot of my focus is, the holistic experience when you come into a room. And I think Gary's got a really interesting point that if you have transitional spaces or huddle spaces or scheduled rooms, you want to be able to allow people to transition between those seamlessly. So because it's often that you don't know what your task is going to be before you go into a room, it turns into an intellectual event where it's one person really deep diving the quiet sort of room event, or huddling around a lot of content. We got it. I kind of feel like we got it better when we weren't in this world of digital. You mentioned that technologies kind of take us off on this sidetrack a bit. I'm a firm believer in that, to be honest. I think that when you had analog spaces and there's paper and 3D models in an architecture firm and a flip chart in the corner, it's easier to think about how the analog space kind of meshes together holistically with the activities in the room. But when it becomes, wait a minute, I have to approach this one panel and hit this one button so that thing over there will wake up and do one thing for this one specific task, we got into these vertically integrated rooms, in a sense. So I'm starting to see, and this is what I hope we're trying to do, is create spaces that the technology is so enabling that you don't see it. It's back to the old analog days. You kind of do what you need to do in the space. It allows you to be more holistic in your thinking about it, I think.
What about you, Farooq? I mean, you're going to do a presentation later on, aren't you? But we're lucky to have a number of different approaches to this really at the moment. But with you, have you approached it from a very technical viewpoint, or how do you holistic or?
No, in fact both. So ours is actually a very young company, so we just started like 8 years back. So we had the opportunity to start the audiovisual solution in a better way compared to many other older companies. But that doesn't mean that we could implement that in the best possible way when we started. But we are also in a learning curve. So what we have learned so far is that giving freedom to employees is the most important thing as an AV team that we can give to them. So it's not just about giving an audiovisual facility in just a room, but also in mobile devices, and integrate with that with IT, security, and other aspects of our building implementation. So as Gary mentioned, giving a solid standard of implementing a room, and also the solution across the globe has been a key success factor for our office building.
Because that's the thing. I mean, how much can you standardise? I mean, you're the sharp end, this, aren't you? I mean,
it depends on your sort of business, though, I think. Yeah. And standardisation is wonderful if you've got employees that are of the same cognitive behaviours and they want the same things. But it feels like at the moment we have the widest generational gap that we're likely to experience. And at one end of the spectrum, we have the importance of quality, which is what some of our older users have gotten used to. They come from the age of telepresence and very simple, simplified control systems that do far less in terms of functionality, but perform consistently and well. And then the younger generations, and it's not really the millennials anymore, it is Generation Z coming through now, they are less concerned about the quality and the performance of their products, but they expect functionality to be really, really high. So matching up those two is where we struggle, because it's wonderful for larger organizations where you've got an AV team and an IT team that are working quite closely together. But I think we recently had a round table, Clive, where we sat around the room, and those larger organizations that have worked towards this standardization, have great training programs in place, are not a true representation of the market. And when you come down in size of business, we have AV and IT teams that do not talk, and certainly don't talk at the start of a process. So that user experience request generally starts with AV, and then we have an IT team very concerned about cybersecurity, supporting it further down the line, that will start to change it. And we end up quite detached from what the original request was. So it's a really tough place for products to be in at the moment, particularly single products and not full ecosystems, because they're less versatile. And I think that's where software comes into its own, because it can be versatile. So the more heavily the feature set is embedded in the software of a solution, the more likely it can be tailored to the individual's experience.
I mean, it's like turning your brain around. Here we are in a very product-oriented show where everything is segmented. You've got audio one bit, the amazing Hall 12 full of video that knocks your socks off when you walk in. Nothing in this entire show screams at you as an environment, or how complementary technologies can be to create an experience, or the sort of environments we're assuming people are having to think about, when they're putting all this stuff together. It must be a nightmare. I mean, how do you get to? I mean, you're a good thinker here, really, and you tend to approach difficult problems in all kinds of ways. I just wonder, because I think from a traditional AV standpoint, we're not hardwired in to think of AV in these sorts of ways. When we're having a load of very disparate requirements thrown at us from people who have a wide range of demands that don't fit into the sort of pigeonholes we've been used to when we've installed equipment or thought of environments to create.
Yeah, but I think Jenny, you hinted at it. It's because AV came out of a standards community. I mean, AV was built around things like the VGA standard and DVI and manufacturing of hardware, and that's changing rapidly. So what that gets you is ubiquity and flexibility and software-driven systems that can be reactive to the user. So we talk a lot about asynchronous reaction, like go to a dashboard and configure a piece of software to fit in every single room. That's kind of an asynchronous thing, but also you can do synchronous stuff, like I'm in a room and the software knows I'm in the room, and it maybe guesses at my intent through artificial intelligence, whatever it might be, to say statistically this room's not good for a call. You should probably go to the next room over where we have a better camera or whatever, or no support tickets related to VTC. Go ahead and do that, and that's just software reacting to you. And if it's a ubiquitous, low cost, and reactive, then you break down those barriers. I think you see those barriers because it's hardware. It's a box. I had to build an AV box that's either audio or something else, and I think that's changed a lot. It'll be the next 5 years that won't be the case.
Do you think so? Is the next 5 years going to be? Is it going to be a predict? I mean, we'll get onto it on this data thing in a minute, but is it going to be a predictable route ahead, or is it going to be very much?
I don't know the answer yet. I mean, I fly all over the world and meet with, some of the Fortune 100s, and what are they thinking about, and how are their spaces evolving. And it gets really interesting to hear, the users talk about their spaces, because I don't think we know. And so the answer for me is data. We have to collect data and process that data to give sort of insights back to the users. Because it's software, can I know that there were 6 people in the room and one person shared PowerPoint for an hour? Well, that sounds like a presentation meeting, and it's probably not very engaging. Let's make sure that we put that in the cloud so that I can go do analytics on that data and figure that out, and maybe understand why that's happening in that space. Is the emotive aspect of the space wrong? Is it designed wrong? Is the color of the walls somehow driving those decisions? All of it. But we don't have to do it as individuals. It's about driving it from the data.
That's massively underestimated at the moment, though, the
Yes.
importance of that data. So particularly in the meeting room, for us to understand and shape the future of the workspace, we need to be collecting it now. We're in a sort of research period. And the more rooms that we can have IoT sensors in that gauge what is the preference, what is it about this room that encourages more people to use it, how are they using it, typically how many people, what meetings are productive in terms of, it's a sort of a difficult way to collect that data, but you can measure the levels of people's voices, how many people are up and about in a meeting, those that have stayed put probably wasn't the most productive of meetings or people weren't enjoying it, how long did they last. All of that data being collected now is what will shape what we do in the future, and then the next stage, of course, is the individual. So the future is probably a presence technology that recognizes you, possibly by voice, and tailors the room and how it's laid out to your preferences. But we can't get there until we monitor all of those behaviors to collect some data around the type of person, the type of activity, and what they want. And that's going to take quite some time. And of course, to the user now, investing in an IoT sensor to tell me the humidity of my room or how many people used it seems ludicrous and a pointless expense, but that's how we will collect this information to shape the products in 5 years' time.
Because you mentioned before about this visual literacy thing and thinking holistically is the way we think we should be doing it, but we can't expand one element of our thinking without actually getting the data that gives us feedback on the basic information we need to know. And that's a concept I had completely overlooked until fairly recently, and it's becoming an issue more and more about how data is used, because people, AV don't think of data really as being something useful. It's an IT thing. But the aspect of what the IT guys call business intelligence is becoming more important, especially as AI functionality starts to develop and the room itself starts to tell you how it's behaving. And that's when we'll see, well actually I think it'll take AV up to another level of how we think about what it's capable of doing when we know more about how it's behaving in the room. And hopefully the vendors will do it. I mean, your product is an evolving one, isn't it, in a sense? So you can tell by how the people use your product, probably what they'll need from their environment as they use it.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of two-way feedback is quite important.
Totally, it's super key. I mean, the product itself is just to make the meeting better, of course, but when the meeting gets better, you have to ask why and things, and that's really where our customers took us quickly. They said, look, we want to collect that data and understand what's happening. The good news, I think, Jenny, you hit it right. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of sensors that have to be deployed, and you have to think through the privacy issues and all this stuff. I think it's really important, really compelling problem space. But the good news is just even a little bit of data helps a lot. So we were in beta with this project called Kepler, that's our analytics cloud thing, and we have a shared workspace company, a really big company that was in the beta program with the data, and they came to us and said, we're already getting usage stats that we're changing the way we flex staff IT in Midtown versus downtown Manhattan, because we now know when the curve starts to fall off at certain Tuesdays in certain rooms, we don't need IT there any longer. It's just a cost-saving thing. So that's not super, future stuff where the AI is predicting before things fail and sending you an email and all that, but it's a cost savings. It's pretty easy to do. So,
will AV skills? What skills will the AV industry need to think? Are we thinking essentially different, or are we thinking traditional AV here? It's just that we'll have a whole family of new products and environments to help us do our job better, or does AV is it a generational thing that people come in will look upon technology differently and therefore demand more functionality from the products they're using, or how?
We are actually more inclined towards employee experience. Of course, we started with the AV, traditional AV solutions. And talking about data, one of the biggest lessons that we learned is that we tend to build a lot of meeting rooms, but then the room utilization rate is something which we are not very happy about in the initial years of building offices. So we started implementing the sensors, started learning how many single-person meeting rooms are being used, at what rate, 2 persons, 3 persons. So we are steadily increasing the utilization rate, but it takes time. We need, It's also about how do we capture the work culture of a company in terms of data, right? And it's not easy as it sounds. It, it, it includes reading the how many people are connecting to our Wi-Fi, how many people are using their security badge to chip in, how many people are accepting the meeting rooms, how many people are attending the meetings. So we are putting together all this data to learn the culture of our company, so that we can implement that and get a better return on investment. So,
do you think we're getting things right? How far have we got so far? Be brutal.
There's
we made. I mean, what mistakes have we made so far, and what can we learn from them?
I think, one of the things that we discovered was that if you're going through a period of aggressive growth, it's very easy to get locked into a solution, and then it can become incredibly difficult to work out how to stop that solution from being replicated and replicated and replicated. So I think I would say that the major lesson that we've learned has been about how to implement change management at scale and at speed.
Change management, that's a chestnut for that. Was a chestnut in the IT world, let alone AV. Yep. Lots of new words and new concepts here. I'm entirely not quite sure that AV's. Well, he's going to have to get at speed with a lot of them, isn't it? So that's quite good. Yeah. Anybody here got any challenges they'd like to talk about? Anybody been involved in workspace development themselves? We've had a few problems. So you'd like to fire a few questions over at all? Be useful to know where you're coming from, whether you're a user, whether you're involved in any kind of implementation at all. Don't be afraid to say anything. You look frightened at the moment. Okay. Oh, hello. Actually, have we got a catch box to throw at you? We might have. Oh, there you are. Look. I'm trying. Yeah.
Wow.
We'll have to abuse our audience here. Just really put your face into it, speak into it.
All right.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Sweet.
Get right in there. Go on.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you mentioned about data and sensors in rooms and being able to get a lot of data out of, the IoT sensors and that sort of stuff. We're a software company and we do that for clients. But one of the biggest hurdles we find is a reluctance for the user to have the software on their device to be able to track that information. How do you guys think about how you tackle that and what's your experience in the market?
That's a chestnut, isn't it? Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
A great question.
So tracking software on a user device, well, where is it incidentally? Just talk up, because where it's being tracked but not on the user device.
So to get successful at being able to understand how people are using the space, you need some sort of software to be able to connect to the IoT device. And to be able to do that, you need something on their either tablet or laptop or mobile device. Okay. And that's how you get the best understanding of how people are actually connecting with their environment, but that actually has a massive privacy issue if there's not a device that is a company device that is actually provided to the user.
Okay.
That's a wider problem though. I think the presence part, yes, probably magnifies it for you in terms of people are even more afraid of what that potentially means for them. Personally, software on any device, including a laptop, we struggle to get end users to agree to load themselves. It's a very different level of sale now to convince people that that's a safe thing to do. And that is a product of the world that we live in terms of cybersecurity and nervousness, and also IT support, because different preferences, different softwares, how many are they going to need to look after? So whilst I think you're potentially at the top end of that problem, it's widespread, and it's about software and a nervousness around software in the same way that AV over IP is driving a nervousness around media on the network, video over the network. We're in a period of transition, and I don't think anyone really knows how long it's going to take for us to gain the trust of the IT personnel and the users that we're not going to abuse that software.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think you've nailed it there. And I think one of the looming challenges for corporate AV teams is to begin this conversation now.
Right.
Yes.
Because you don't necessarily have solutions now, but those solutions are going to come along much quicker than I think you might be anticipating. And you may find yourself in an enterprise being one of the first teams who need to go through that process of working at some level of depth with HR, legal, and also IT to come up with a workable policy around data capture. And we've been through that. It's not easy, it's not quick, it takes time, it takes a lot of resources. There's very little, if no expertise in the AV field around it. So, if you take away one thing from what I'm saying today, it's if you're a corporate customer, you really do need to be beginning that conversation now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I want to add to that, I think, a little bit, because there's like employees, I think, are just people, right? They're just a human being. And when you get software, and you'll like this because Uber does it really well, it's if I'm installing software on my device and there's an expectation that I'm going to give up a bit of privacy, then there's a social contract that then I have to get value. I personally should be getting value out of it. Where things break down is when the company says, we're going to get value out of it, not you. But Uber, of course, knows where I am because I have a contract with them. There's value in them knowing where I am. So if you're able to tell your employees, look, there's a closed loop here that when we understand where our best meetings are happening, we're going to present that back to you so that you can pick the space that's best for you and your team. Yep. That immediately changes the discussion. It's like, hey, and maybe the software you're installing doesn't just track you, because that's again breaking the social contract. It also adds value in other ways. And in our case, it's so that you can throw content onto screens easily or whatever. But that same software now will tell you where your meeting might be the best place to hold it, right? You have to close the loop, I think is the point.
Yeah. And we probably need to learn some similar lessons to what marketing companies have had to learn in GDPR. There needs to be an element of choice here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to opt in. I either want to make my movements available to everyone because that's going to improve my day and improve my timekeeping, or actually I only want to choose when I let people know where I am. And if I'm in this meeting and I'm not going to be disturbed, then I am going to tell people where I am and show that I'm not to be disturbed. But I'm not going to let you follow me on my route back to my desk. I'll let you know when I'm ready to accept you at my desk. And that it'll be this gradual phase towards it. But what you're describing is exactly the future. It's now how sensitive and clever we are to get there and have everyone on board.
So one of the examples was that we were trying to implement the wayfinding solution. So we decided not to implement a wayfinding solution to a colleague, because that simply means that we are breaching into his privacy, right? So it's also about finding the balance between the privacy, respecting employees, and at the same time giving them the best employee experience possible within that boundaries. So I think we have the technologies, but we need to find a balance between the technologies to get the solution. Yeah.
Flexible working comes into that as well, I think. So we notice a lot of businesses are not ready to allow the levels of activity-based working, home working, as some of the more innovative companies are doing. And it's a trust element. How can you possibly be sure where your employees are? And I think that will drive some of this technology forward, because the employees want those benefits. They want the flexible hours. They want to be able to work from anywhere. And the company deserves to be able to see where they are, how productive they're being. Have we lost any of that productivity by you being allowed that flexibility, or is it working, and can we extend it to more? So that will be the sort of give and take movement as well, but it's the opting in, and we have to make sure that they do it by choice, and that they can disable it when needs be, until it becomes part of our culture and we're all happy that it's not being abused.
Good, well thank you very much. We're over our time, of course. It's snapping into your presentation time. But Chris, Gary, Jenny and Farooq, thanks very much, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.